Hey guys, welcome back. This is Vijay Kumar Vemula, Citrix and Azure Architect and Trainer. In the series of videos that which we are going to see, this is the first one on Azure Active Directory. In this discussion of today, we are going to understand what Azure Active Directory is and where and how it can be used, the different editions or SKUs or licenses that which you have in Azure Active Directory. And then we'll see how do we create and manage users and groups. Without waiting further, let us get into the discussion. The first question, the fundamental question, what Azure Active Directory is. Azure Active Directory is an identity service. You can call it as ID as a service. And this ID as a service or identity service sits on your Azure. Then what is the purpose of this? Where can I use it? The identities that which you create on Azure Active Directory, you use to grant access to your Microsoft SaaS applications like Microsoft 365, Exchange 365, or SharePoint 365, and so on. And not only apps related to Microsoft, you can also grant access to other SaaS applications, software as service applications. Example, Salesforce, Workday, and there are many other applications which are cloud-based applications, which we call it as SaaS apps. You can get your users authenticate and get into them by using Azure hosted Active Directory identities. So I explained you can use this for your Microsoft SaaS apps. You can use for external or other apps other than Microsoft. And you can also use them to grant access to your portal. Maybe you got some administrators, or there might be multiple teams in your organization who need access to different services of Azure based on their role, based on what permissions they require. You can grant access to Azure Active Directory users and groups. That is another usage of your Azure AD. And in case if you got internal in-house applications, you can also integrate them with Azure Active Directory as well. So your Azure Active Directory identity provides you to grant access to not only Microsoft SaaS applications and other SaaS applications, but also it will help you to grant access to your internal applications that whatever you develop. Some terminology around it. The first term that which we'd like to understand is what is Azure identity. It's an entity or item that can be authenticated. The term that which I would like to explain next is account. Every identity will have some data associated with it. Which group he is part of, which group the identity is part of, what is the UPN of that, or maybe what is the job title, who is his manager. So an identity that has data associated with it, you call it as account. And any account or any identity that is there on Azure Active Directory, you call it as Azure AD account. And then comes another very important terminology that which we need to understand is Azure AD tenant. Let me show you that quickly. So in Azure, in order to use your Azure services, what you generally do is you as a user or an organization will sign up to the Azure. So you sign up to the Azure maybe as an individual or as an organization. So when you sign up and create an account, during the creation of the account, Azure creates you a subscription, and it also creates a tenant. It also creates a tenant whenever you create an account. Creates a tenant. Now, what is this tenant? So, whenever you subscribe to your Azure Active Directory, whenever you subscribe to Azure, it creates a tenant. This basically represents an organization. Represents an organization. Of course, within one account, you can have multiple tenants. That is very much possible, which I will be explaining you in our upcoming videos. But remember, a tenant here represents an organization. Now, along with this tenant, you also get a default directory created. It creates a directory. And this directory gets created with your email address that whatever you use. That's the default directory that gets created. In case if you're using an email address xyz@abc.com to subscribe yourself to Azure, then the directory that what it creates is something like this: xyzabc.onmicrosoft.com. If you use an email address Vemula for you at hotmail.com, then it creates a default domain or directory with the name Vemula for you hotmail.onmicrosoft.com. So whenever you subscribe yourself, sign up yourself to Azure, it is creating three things. One is tenant, which represents your organization. Along with the tenant, it creates a directory, which comes with a default domain name. And of course, the subscription anyway that gets created, which we will be understanding maybe in one of the videos. For now, understand subscription is for billing and compliance management purpose. Now that's what these terminologies are all about. Tenant, a dedicated and trusted instance of Azure AD that automatically creates when your organization signs up to Azure Cloud. A tenant represents a single organization. And Azure Active Directory, it's a dedicated trusted AAD directory or domain where you will have your users and groups. Okay, so far what I understood is what Azure Active Directory. It's an identity service on Azure Cloud. Some terminologies related to that: identity account, tenant, and directory. Then how do I use this? What are the different licensing solutions we have? Azure Active Directory, whenever you subscribe yourself to Azure, it creates a free Azure Active Directory. It gets created as a free edition. If you are looking for an advanced solution, either you can go with P1 or P2 licensing models or editions, whatever you call it as. And if you're already a user of Office 365 apps, you're already using Azure Active Directory. So let me quickly show you the different options that which you have across these editions. So what I will do is I'll quickly switch to the portal. So I'll go and quickly look at for Azure AD Active Directory pricing details. And here you go. Now these are the different editions you have. One is free tier, Office 365 apps, Premium 1 and Premium 2. So these are the three editions. Now there are few features which are common across all these editions, right? So core identity and access management services. Of course, for free edition, you can go with 50,000 objects that which you can create, and for other editions or pricing models, you don't have any limit as such. But when you look at these premium features, all right, so there are very useful features for enterprises. For example, uh, password protection. You can custom the passwords that can be banned. You may not want to allow your users to use test@123 password. So those type of password protections, you can get it in premium features, and then you can go with self-service password resets, which means that users can reset the passwords on their own. And then group access management, MDM solutions. You can add your end user systems to Azure Active Directory, which will help you to control the devices by using Microsoft Intunes, right? And then you can use a feature called as application proxy, which helps you to use your on-premises hosted applications to use your Azure Active Directory. Very much possible. And then Connect Health, or which is called as AD Connect Health, another troubleshooting tool that which will help you to understand the synchronization of user IDs from on-premises to Azure Active Directory. Dynamic groups, you can automatically add users to the groups by using the feature called as dynamic groups. Conditional access, which protects your users. You define certain conditions when user can log in, maybe as from a specific location or device which has got these features or services running. Multifactor authentication, again security solution, which will help you to use more than one identity validation methods, maybe a user ID and OTP or some other way of just using a users and password to authenticate yourself. So these are all features which are there in P1 and P2, and there are features only available in P2. Risk identities, risk-based conditional access policies, privileged identity management, access reviews, identifying the risk accounts. All those features you have in P2, what do you call it as licensing model. So based on your requirement and features that which you want, you can go with one of these, licensing models. When it comes to the cost of these, then you see in P1 and P2, the IDs are charged based on per user per month, around $6 if it is P1 per month. It is and it is $9 per user per month. $6 per user per month if it is P1 and P2, $9 per user per month. So somewhere you need to understand your requirement and pick which particular licensing fits for your requirement and choose accordingly. The next section, let us quickly see how do you create users, and we'll try to understand some of the settings of the users, and then we'll see how do you create groups, and then we'll see there is a dynamic groups feature which comes only in premium edition, and we'll also try to understand that. Let's get into action. So I want to straight away switch to my Azure portal. Now, in order to use your Azure Active Directory service, you go and look for a service called as Azure Active Directory. So this is the service which will help you with the identity management. If you look at the overview section of Azure Active Directory, here you find what type of licenses you got. And you see it, I got P2 licenses, but in case if you're going with a free trial subscription, then you will be listed here as a license type as free. And I was talking about tenant and what do you call it as a directory or default domain. So you can look at this is the tenantry ID, this is tenant ID, and the name of the default directory and the domain that what it creates. So since I used wamlaforyou@hotmail.com, the primary domain that it creates is wamlaforyou.onmicrosoft.com. Then let us quickly see how do we do user and group management. So within Azure Active Directory, you got this option called as users, from where you can manage existing users, whatever you have, and you can create new users from here. A normal user and guest user. I will talk about guest users in a separate video, but today we are going to see only Azure Active Directory user. So let us quickly try to create a user. I'll call it as demo user 1, and then I can go and copy the user ID here in a notepad. So this is how the UPN, user principal name, of your Azure Active Directory with this domain name looks like. Then if you look at the other details, that whatever it is asking, what is the user name, what is the first name, last name, maybe the first name is same and then last name is, let us say, some X, okay, so just put X. And then you got here an option to feed a password, or you can use an auto-generated password. So if you want to use Azure generated password, you can just click on this show password option, and then you can go and copy the password of this user ID and you can share this with your end user. Now in case if you want to feed your own password, you can use this option. And then if you want to add this user ID to any of the groups, you have here an option to add the groups, which we'll be seeing later. And by default, this user ID will be of a role called as user's role. If you want to block the user sign in for the time being, then you can use block sign in, which means users will not be able to, or rather user will not be able to log in with the user ID and password, whatever you just generated, until and unless it is unblocked. So maybe the user is going to join after 6 days or 7 days. Initially, I'll block it and maybe I'll unblock later. You can also restrict user login in the sense If you select here, maybe let us say India, this user will be able to log in only from the location India. If user tries to log in from any other location other than India, he will not be able to. And then you got job title. I'll name this guy as IT admin, IT admin. And I'll name this department as IT, the company name, manager name, and so on. So you can create your users like this. Just click hit create, and then you should be able to see the user ID, demo user 1 here, right? So this is the user ID. So let us quickly get into a portal, get into portal with this user ID and see how the login process will be. For this demonstration, I'm going to go and use Azure portal itself. But you can also use apps.microsoft.com to access the applications, which I will be showing in our subsequent videos. But this user is trying to get into the portal using user ID and password. All right. So now he is logging for the first time, isn't it? So obviously it will ask for change of credentials. So I am changing the credentials, right? And then this guy signs in. So like that, your users will be able to get into your Azure environment using the IDs that whatever you create. So this is how you create users in Azure Active Directory. Now, a couple more things that which I would like to explain here. So when you delete a user in Azure Active Directory, the deleted user will not be straight away deleted. He goes and sits in these deleted users. You see it, all the previously deleted users. And the user will be permanently deleted only after 30 days. In the meantime, if you want to go back and restore this user ID, you can always do it. And the other, things that which you may have to know is every user ID login details are tracked under the activity. You see it, I'm under users, under the activity sign-ins. This gives you the sign-ins that which has happened across the entire Azure Active Directory. So from which client machine this particular sign-in has happened, and of course this is the location where I am in, and so on, right? So those information you can see it. And the same information you can also go and look at for the individual user as well. If you go to a demo user, for the individual user, if you look at the activity here also, you will be able to see the sign-in details of that user. Maybe it takes a couple of minutes here, but anyway, you can see this audit logs, which basically gives you what are the things that which this guy has done. Right, so password changed, right? So these are all the entities, and you will be also able to see in some time the login details, whatever he had just now. But otherwise, for all the users, you can go to the users itself and look at the individual user login details. Now, if you want to reset the password of this user, so you have here an option called as, where is that, password reset. Yeah, so select the user and you can reset the password from here. In case if user forgets the password and he calls you, then you as an administrator can reset the password from here. And let me go to the user itself, that which we just created. Where is that demo user 1? Every user will have an object ID. And sometimes you will be using, in case if you are automating something, if you require a user identity, you may be asked to give the object ID. Here it looks like, here is how it is, right? You can pick the object ID of the user from here. And the other parameters that which you passed, and of course you can always go back and edit these values, isn't it? Now, if the user is assigned to any of the roles, here roles are Azure Active Directory roles. In case if he is assigned to any of the Azure Active Directory roles, those lists will be listed. And then if he is part of any groups, you'll also see, this particular user, is now added to 2 or 3 groups. I'll show you why it is. This is a dynamic group. This is dynamic group. I'll explain what dynamic group in some time. Just remember this. So he is automatically added to these groups. And if he got some access to applications, you can see he got access to these applications because he's part of some groups. And licenses, if this guy has got licenses like Office 365, any other licenses, you will be able to see all the licenses assigned to the user here. You can also register your user devices. There's something called as Azure AD Join and Azure AD Registration, which I will be explaining you in a separate topic, but you can see the devices used by this manager and role assignments, and then what do you call it as multi-factor authentication and other settings here. And then the other thing that whatever I explained. Now, this is the user part. And again, I said I will be explaining this guest user in a separate video. Let us quickly get into the groups. Now, you can also create groups. Now, why do you need group, first of all? Rather managing, access to the application's individual user, you can create a group and add users to the groups and provide access to the apps, or maybe to the licenses, or maybe part of the role-based access control. So all those things you can manage by using a group rather an individual user. Then in order to create a group in Azure Active Directory, so you have these groups, within the groups you have this option called as new group. And from here you can create 2 types of groups. One is Office 365 or Microsoft 365 groups. And you can also create a security group. Now the difference between 365 and security, this is specifically for your Office 365 apps access. And if you want to go and use the group for other purposes within Azure Active Directory or even Azure Portal, then that should be a security group. Now I'm going to go and name this as Demo Group 1. So I think this is already there. So I'll say that Demo Group 10. And then the description of the group itself. And then there is something called as a membership type. So I'm not going to discuss this roles. This will be discussed later. Membership type. So you have 3 types of memberships here, isn't it? One is assigned, second one is dynamic user, the third one is dynamic device. So let me create this as an assigned group, which means that you manually add users to this group. So when you create a group type called assigned, you are going to manually add users to the group. So if you want to add members to this, you can go and add members, the same user that whatever you created, demo user 1 can be added here. Go ahead and create. So this creates a group called as demo group 10. I am going to go and create another group which is demo group 11. So this time, instead of group type called as assigned, I am going to go and select it as a dynamic user. So when you select a dynamic user, the addition of the users to this group will be automated. But how does this automation work? That's where you are going to define when users can be added to this group, and what criteria users are automatically added to this group is defined by your add dynamic query. So when I click add dynamic query, it gives you these options to add expressions, to add those conditions along with the properties based on that user is automatically added to this particular group. So for example, I want to say if the user, okay, so if the user department is equals to IT, then I'll say that go and add that user to this group. So whenever I create any user and define the department of that user IT, then that user will be automatically added to this group 11. So you can go and create a membership type based on dynamic user and of course the dynamic device. This is the same thing for your device, which means that you can write queries for your devices. So I can go and add this dynamic group. Now if you look at the difference, membership type, it is dynamic, it is assigned. If it is assigned, then you can always go and add members manually. I can go and add one more user, right? This accounting user, I can add it. But if it is dynamic, you will not be adding things manually, isn't it? So if I go to the same demo 11, which is a dynamic user, if I go to members, then this add members option is grayed out. Why? Because the additions of the users here is managed by your dynamic queries. That's what you defined here under the dynamic membership rules. And you see, if the user is part of the IT department, he will be automatically added here. You need not have to manually add anything here. Now, the user that whoever you have created earlier, the demo user, where is that? The demo user one, this guy, what is the IT department name? The department is IT, which means that in some time you will be able to see this user part of the dynamic group. I'll create one more user ID in the meanwhile. Okay, so it takes a while, maybe 4 to 5 minutes. In the meantime, I'll go and create one more user with the name called as demo user 2. And then I will use the name, same thing, first name, last name, and then again, whether you want to give your own password or you want to copy the password, whatever is generated automatically. And then this time also I'll say the job title, IT admin, and then put department as IT. Now, since this department of this user is IT, now this guy should also go and sit in this dynamic group, isn't it? In this dynamic group. So in some time, you will be able to see this particular demo group 11, isn't it? Now, this should have, yeah, you already see the demo user 1. Now, in some time, you will also be able to see demo user 2 listed here. Demo user 2 listed here. Now, the other thing I was explaining during the validation of this user account, right? Demo user 1, this demo user 1, we didn't add him to any of these groups, isn't it? We manually added to only one group, that is demo group 10, but not 11 or AZ group 1 or this Simply Learn IT group. And of course, this is a default one. Anyway, it got added. But how is this getting added to these groups, right? This is dynamic group. And again, if you go to this group itself, then if you look at dynamic membership rules, it has this rule called as if the department is IT, then this any user with that department name should be automatically added. So you can go and automate your group additions to the groups, users additions, I'm sorry, to the groups by creating a dynamic groups. Now remember, in order to use the dynamic groups, you should have a premium licenses. This dynamic group option will be grayed out in case if you're using a free trial kind of account. This will be grayed out, but if you are using a free account, you can get a 30 days, what do you call it, as P2 licenses for free. So then how can you do it? Go to your Azure Active Directory, activate it by going to the licenses, go to all products, and you got this option called as try and buy. Under try and buy, if you click on this free trial, you can activate your free trial for 30 days with P2, what do you call it, as P2 licensing futures. So if you're using a free account, just go ahead here and activate it. Then you should be play around with all the premium futures. But otherwise, you will be paying based on whatever you have here, isn't it? Maybe around $6 P1 and $9 P2. You can play around with a free edition by activating a 30 days trial, isn't it? So go ahead and use it. So I think that's all I have for this video. Another video, I'll come back with another interesting topic on Azure Active Directory. Till then, bye. Take care.